Will you
Sure,
please
Deborah.
check your phone for a text I just sent to you? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go ahead as we're waiting for Dave, and we will go ahead and discuss the minutes. So we'll call the meeting to order at 2:03 p.m. And then did everybody get a chance to review the minutes? Okay. Do we have any changes to the minutes? Okay, and then the other question, sorry y'all, is whether or not we want to continue with the format as it is or have the more detailed back and forth format.
I personally, I mean, it's up to you, Chair Coombs, but I personally like the summary because otherwise I know they have done that, the verbatim, and you have to go back and forth. You have to really look at the minutes. It takes me about sometimes an hour or two to look at Pfizer minutes when I have to do that. So I think just the basic summary, the highlights would be what I would vote for. So.
Councilmember Marcano?
I think I'm fine with the current structure. We do have these meetings all recorded and streamed, so I guess if we want more detail, we can just pull up the previous stream.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking as well, is if folks really want to see exactly what was said, they can watch the meeting, the stream. So I'm okay with that as well. We can go ahead and keep it as the summary minutes. Thank you both. And do we approve the minutes as written? Okay, great. All right, well, with that, I will go ahead and let Dave begin with, or I guess I'll start and Dave can talk about any details on item 3A, which is updating the charter language to be gender neutral. The purpose of that is just that at times there can be provisions that are written that are unnecessarily gendered, right? That use man as the default. So we don't have a lot of sections in our current charter that are written that way. But wherever man is currently used as the neutral or default, we would want to use a gender neutral, so person instead of man and they instead of he or she. So it won't be a lot of provisions based on what Dave was able to find. But Dave, can you comment a little bit about whether or not we're going to have to publish all of those sections versus providing that just a summary?
Indeed. The council member is correct. I was actually impressed when I read our charter, given when it was drafted, that our charter was fairly forward-looking. They avoided most gender references, and when they did have gender references, most of them, they tried to be inclusive by using the expression he or she or him or her, so they included both. And the charter also has a general provision up at the front of the charter that's saying, by the way, all gender references are inclusive of all genders. So for a 1961 document, it was ahead of its time, but it did have, a dozen and a half, 2 dozen references where they used he or she, and particularly they would sometimes say his or him. they would revert down to one gender. I noticed that they presume the city attorney is going to be a him. They presume the city manager is going to be a him. And that is perhaps less than fully inclusive. So I searched the charter for all such terms. Also chairman as opposed to chairperson. And we found all of the provisions where there was gender-specific language. And though that gender-specific language by the terms of the charter refers to everybody, we just changed it so that it is inclusive. We made he or she, there, him or her, they, him, they. Occasionally I changed the language to use the pronoun rather than the noun. If it was referring to the city manager or city attorney, I might have taken out him and put back in city manager or city attorney. So we've eliminated that. So the language of the ballot question is fairly straightforward. Are we going to change those references to gender neutral, inclusive, non-binary references, which is very easy. It becomes rather than his or her, them or they. And then to show where that would actually happen, I pulled up for the council member each one of those sections and then made the section with the deletion and the assertion in bold of the new language. Now on the ballot itself, to answer the council member's question, we do not have to include that long document that has those 12.5 sections. What we do have to do is we have the ballot question that goes out, and then we have to post the exact language as an ordinance form. And that, by terms of the charter, gets displayed or put on display in the city attorney's office. It may be well also to put that on display in the city clerk's office, so that any citizen that says, well, I kind of understand this ballot question, but I'd like to see what it actually looks like, will be able to see what it actually looks like so that they are a very well-informed voter. So for the council member, I drafted not just the ballot question, but what all those changes would look like when implemented. So we would, if this moves forward, we would be posting those in our office, and if Mr. Bratzman thinks it's advisable, in the city clerk's office as well.
All right, so are there any questions about this item?
It's Chair Coombs, it's no questions on this particular item, but I do have a question about the structure of this meeting. Except for your item, we went over 3B, 3C last year. So I'm trying to understand, okay, is this to go to council or is this for the hearing or both? Because we're about to go through 3B, 3C, and 3D. These were talked about last year, but now we're rehashing these issues today, and I'm trying to understand what are we doing here? Because I really don't understand. Is this going to council so they can decide on the ballot questions, or are we trying to move this to both where the hearing? Because I thought we were going to kind of look at these to move these to the hearing, and then they were going to go to council. So if you could, I'm sorry to interrupt the item, but I'm just trying to understand really what's the thought process here.
So I think in our last meeting, we had said we wanted to just review the items that had been covered last year for the purpose of having that information to provide for the public hearing.
Okay.
And then after the public hearing, the citizens task force, then we will have one last meeting to review everything to send to council so that it can all be voted on in time for whatever is going to get put forward to go to the ballot. So this is to make sure that we're clear on what we're sending for the public hearing and for the citizens committee.
Okay, and I guess my last question before we move forward, and I'm sorry to interrupt with that. So thank you for that clarification. I think it's also important to provide the links from what happened, what the discussion was last year to the people who are going to be at the or available for the hearing, just to let people know that there was discussion on these items that we talked, except for the one that you brought up. So I think we're having this discussion now. This is a whole different group of people, except for myself and Councilmember Marcano, but a lot of these 3B, 3C, and 3D be were discussed. And I think that that information, to be transparent, should be also somewhere included, somewhere, the link of those meetings or something. So I just wanted to add that, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to make sure what direction we were going here.
Councilmember Coombs, if I may jump in here for a
Yes, go
moment.
ahead, Deborah.
So, Councilmember Lawson, these three items to which you're referring were initially on the agenda as one item and the discussion would be about agreeing to move these forward to a public hearing.
Okay, I understand that.
and
I
so-
understand. Thank you for the clarification, Deborah. I understand that. You don't have to repeat that. What I was trying to understand, though, is that this was going to the public hearing, but I also think it's important that these issues were discussed last year. And I think that that information should be added somewhere where people know what those discussions were as well. So you don't have to repeat. I understand right now. I just wanted to make sure if this was kind of going to both, or if we were kind of going through the process that we were going through.
Councilmember Lawson, this is Katie. I just want to let you know for that Engage Aurora site we spoke about, we met with communications and created that Engage Aurora for the public, and the link to the minutes for this committee is included for the public on there as well, so they can look back at it. And if there's any other way that you'd like for us to let the public know about these previous discussions, we can meet with you and we can do that.
Can we also, Katie, have the link to the minutes if there's a separate place that the meeting's listed besides the Engage Aurora site, like if it's under other meeting schedules for the city of Aurora, like the council calendar or anything like that, to make sure the links to all the minutes, so for last year and this year, are included under the meeting information?
Yeah, of course. Anywhere we'll get with communications, and anywhere that this committee is mentioned, we'll make sure to include the minutes, a link to the minutes. And then also what we can do is for the citizens committee, include a link to y'all's minutes on their webpage as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much for laying that out. And thank you, Councilmember Lawson, for just clarifying those items. So with respect to the current item, are there any questions or discussion? Okay. Any objection to moving that forward to the public hearing? Okay. Well, then seeing none, we will go ahead and move that item forward to the public hearing. And then we will move on to 3B, the ballot question for even numbered years. Councilmember Marcano.
Thank you, Councilmember Coombs. So just as a reminder or refresher, the intent of this question would be to increase participation in our municipal elections. Since we discussed this last year, I'm proud to report that Boulder, Colorado has actually joined Castle Rock and Parker in moving their municipals to even years. So they're going to realize some cost savings by, basically joining into a coordinated election with other jurisdictions. And they are very likely to see what Parker and Castle Rock enjoy, which is a voter participation rate that closely matches what we see for presidential and midterm years. So I believe this last cycle, Castle Rock and Parker enjoyed a participation rate close to 90%. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to move this forward so that Aurora can join the ranks of having municipal participation better match its even year turnout. And this would take effect in 2026. So the way it's written, it would cut folks who would get elected this year. It would reduce the term to 3 years. And then they'd run again in 2026. And then the folks who are who get elected in 25 would run again in 28. And then from there on, it's 4-year terms again.
Okay, thank you for the presentation and the information. Is there any discussion on this item?
There's no discussion for me, but I'm still in the same stance I was last year. But I am interested to hear what people in the community have to say. It doesn't mean that I couldn't look at it from a different perspective, but I'm still not for this. But I'm willing to move it towards the committee hearing.
And Councilmember Lawson, remind me, last time one of your concerns was that cutting short of the terms.
No, it was that, but also too, I just think that, and I said this, I think that there's a reason, you know, you're putting this on here. I understand you're looking for more participation, but I also don't see it as a way, the ballot is already so long as it is. And then you're going to have people look at issues, council members, and, you know, pick those elections in part with issues as well. So the ballot is so long, people are so overwhelmed during even election years from just getting just tons of information. So I just have concerns about that more so than anything. And the ballot is already long as it is. We saw our ballot this year. So adding on council elections as well, I think that that's just going to be a little overwhelming. But again, that was two of my reasons from last year, from what I can remember. But I'm willing to move this forward to the hearing to hear other perspectives. So
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Mhm.
And yeah, I would say that for my part, the down ballot roll-off participation is still higher than our municipal election participation. So, you know, we can look at other avenues certainly, but from my perspective, I think we still get greater participation than we would. So I support this, and I certainly also support forwarding it to, you know, to the members of the public to hear what they have to say, because I think it is important to understand from their perspective
Mhm.
how it would impact them as the people voting. So Councilmember Medina, do you have any thoughts or comments?
Not at this time, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Katie, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to throw this out there, and I can start talking to the other county clerks. But if we're going to do a coordinated election, if the counties will allow us to do a coordinated election on an even numbered year with them, it's going to be a lot more expensive due to the VSPC locations. So just for reference, in 2022, just because it was on an even numbered year and they needed more VSPC locations, this is just Arapahoe County charged just $300,000. And in 2021, because of the number of VSPC locations they needed, because it was an odd numbered year, it was 76,000. So that is, there's a lot of more different costs, but that's a main one that we want to keep in mind as we discuss this.
Councilmember Coombs.
Thank you, Katie. Yes, Councilmember Marcano.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Katie. I'd be curious to know, I guess, what the difference is between how Boulder County is coordinating that and how our counties are. Maybe it's because we sit in multiple counties, but my understanding was that Boulder is actually going to see a cost savings just due to, you know, spreading that load out among our other jurisdictions for a larger coordinated. So I guess I just want some more information on that because, and just frankly, even if that is the case, I still think the increased participation would be worth it. And I also wanted to address Councilmember Lawson's concern. I had that same concern when I first looked into this issue. But we can see from Castle Rock and from Parker that their turnout for, like, you know, there's no drop off really from, you know, from their state legislative race, county level races, etc. It's within like a point or two of the total turnout for their council races and those other races. So, but I find that frankly to be a relief because that means that folks are actually, like, you know, voting the whole ballot and doing their research. And I would hope that we'd have the same experience here, and we will find out how Boulder fares next year.
Yeah. Councilmember Coombs, Councilmember
Yes,
Marcano,
Councilmember Lawson.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Marcano, I appreciate that information. I still think, and I understand, I'm not going to say what I really think about what's going on and behind this intent, but if we're looking at it from that perspective, I understand that people are going to vote on the even years, but it's a lot of information, at least in the coordinated elections. I understand you're trying to get more people because there's reasons behind that as well. But people can kind of see or concentrate a lot on what's going on in their city. So I think we're just going to agree to disagree. But again, I would like to hear what people have to say, because maybe there's some perspectives that outside of the ones that you've presented that maybe give me some more information about how people feel in the community, which I think is most important. So.
All right, appreciate that.
Yep. Thank you, Councilmember Lawson. Katie, I would want to know, like, what drives the different number of VSPCs and what the impact of fewer VSPCs in our municipal races is on that turnout, because we see we have fewer and then we also have much lower turnout. And I know we can't make a direct correlation because there's many impacts. But also, like, what would be the cost if we wanted to have more VSPCs during municipal elections to try to up that turnout?
So
If they were in the odd years.
the location numbers depend on the voting count. So that's what the counties go by, and that's a state statute. So that's why in even numbered years, when we coordinate with them for a special election, it is significantly more expensive because they have to have more voting centers because there's a higher voting count. On odd numbered years, that's normally when they do their coordinated elections, and they don't have to have as many VSPC locations as outlined in state statute.
So we still have the same number of registered voters in the city of Aurora, whether it's an odd year or an even year, right?
Right, but there's different jurisdictions that coordinate with the county. So there's more jurisdictions coordinating with them in even numbered years. And so that's why they're having more VSPC, because there's more voters total, not just from our jurisdiction.
Okay, so essentially we're getting charged in the even numbered years for other jurisdictions' voters.
Right, so they take the total and divide it by the sum of active registered voters for all coordinated counties, and that's how they get their weighted population average. And then that's what they multiply by the total election expense to get our total due to them.
Okay, so if other municipalities were to sign up for even numbered year elections, would that then theoretically reduce the burden on the city of Aurora of costs?
That's a tricky math question because it would just depend on how many more voters are being added to the total and what that pushes them up to with VSPC centers. So it could be more, it could be less.
Okay, it's a little confusing to me because it does seem like we still have the same number of voters that we should be paying for, and probably that we should be hoping and expecting and trying to encourage to vote. So that
right. And I can send this everybody on this meeting the two different invoices that I have for 2021 and 2022, and they're itemized. So that might help a little bit more on when you take a look at it, but they go by their total election cost, which when they have more registered voters voting, which they do in an even numbered year, then it's going to drive up our costs because they're going to have more VSPC locations.
Yeah. I think this is probably more of a principled conversation where, I might want to talk with county clerks about the impact of fewer VSPCs on municipal election turnout in odd years. So, but I would appreciate seeing that information. But I have some concern that we actually are not doing ourselves any favors by having fewer VSPCs in even year elections. So, all right. I will, however, stop carrying on about that subject. Does anybody else have any further comments on this item or questions? Okay. Well, thank you, Councilmember Marcano, and thank you everyone for the discussion. We will move on to 3C, ballot question regarding partisan elections and vacancy committees. So Councilmember Marcano again.
Thank you, Councilmember Coombs. So for the committee and for the public, this second question that I'm sponsoring would make our elections transparently partisan. From my perspective, they already are and often have and always have been. This would just bring that out into the forefront. The only substantive change you would see from this is that on the ballots for council races, you would have U's, D's, R's, L's, whatever else folks are affiliated as on there. And then this also ties into how we fill vacancies. You all may recall the struggle we had in filling Councilmember Johnston's vacancy and the charter violation that ensued after council could not come to an agreement. So what this does is it lays out two scenarios. One is independent of a partisan race, and then the other one is assuming we have partisan races for vacancies. So the first is if there is a vacancy, the vacancy committee would be formed rather than council getting to pick who serves with them, which I don't think is appropriate. The vacancy committee would be made up of registered electors belonging to the party of the departing council member. Very similar to how our state legislature and state senate, our state legislature vacancies are filled in Colorado. So the precinct officers or precinct committee people make up the vacancy committee so that the values voters chose stay with the seat. The alternative, and for unaffiliated council members, what that would do, their vacancy committee would be their nominators on their petition. Or, as you all know, when you're running for a ward, you have to get 50 signatures from registered electors. And when you're running at large, you have to get 100 to qualify for the ballot. So the folks who signed your petition would be your vacancy committee. And then the second alternative that we have here for the vacancy process is just dispelling parties in general and just utilizing the nominating petition as your vacancy committee, whether the races are partisan or not. So that would be the 50 folks who would sign ward council members' petitions or the 100 folks who would sign at-large and mayoral candidates' petitions. So that is what this question does. Happy to take any questions.
Okay. Any questions for Councilmember Marcano?
Councilmember Coombs, again, I don't have any questions and I'm willing to move this forward. But as I addressed last year, one of the beauty, I understand that our council is partisan, but one of the beauties of being in local politics is that it's considered nonpartisan. I do have concerns and I understand we've researched it, being from the state, whatever, but there may be people who are in certain positions. It may even be something outside of state politics that because this is considered partisan, they may not be able to participate in the process. And I'm not saying that it happened. I'm not saying it's happening to everybody at the state, but I'm not saying it's not going to happen other places. But there's other things where there are certain organizations that you can't be partisan. And so I just think that this takes away from people who may want to get into local government, regardless of whatever their party affiliation is. Really, it should be really to serve the people, not whether if you're a D, I, L, whatever. But I just think it takes away from that by putting the name, the letters or the whatever by people. Find out about people. Let people know. So I disagreed with this one. I disagree with it today because of certain things that I said last year and what I'm stating today, which is some of the same principles and some of the same things, not principles, but some of the same things I said last year. But I'm willing to hear from the public about it because I think it would be interesting of who has what opinions about it and kind of go from there. But I do disagree with this, but I'm willing to move it forward.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Lawson. Councilmember Marcano, I have a question around the filling of vacancies portion. So in the instance that a person has a party, we're saying essentially their seat would be filled, the vacancy committee would be choosing someone from their party. So in the instance that someone is unaffiliated, do we also require that the person to fill their vacancy should also be unaffiliated?
We do not require that in the ordinance or in the question as it is drafted. As I mentioned earlier, the vacancy committee would be made up of the nominators. So it could be that they would choose someone who's also unaffiliated. It could be that they would choose someone with a partisan affiliation. But ultimately, the idea here is to keep the values with a seat. So the values of your the values that your nominators supported would be preserved. At least that's the idea.
Okay, that actually is a little bit confusing to me, and here's why. Because essentially, for the vacancy committee for a partisan election, only people of that party would be eligible, right, to be chosen by that vacancy committee. Is that the case? Or would an unaffiliated person also be permitted to run for that vacancy for one of the partisan like vacancy committee?
No, it's the same structure that we use today. So you would have to, it's in order to be one of the vacancy committee members, you are a precinct committee person for one of our major parties per the SOS.
Right, but then the candidates also have to be of that party.
You know, and for our state vacancy committees, I had just always assumed that they're of the same party, but I'm not sure if that's actually a requirement. So I'd actually defer to Dave on that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was muted. And the answer is, as near as I could find out, it's never happened that it was not somebody of that party, but it is such a strong presumption that it's not written as a rule. Pretend I'm independent. The Democrats could nominate me. The Republicans could, the Libertarians could. It doesn't have to be somebody from that party, but I'm having extreme difficulty, other than as a logical question or as a conundrum, picturing essentially a caucus picking somebody from outside that caucus. It's never going to happen, but could it happen in theory? It could happen in theory.
So here's my issue, is that it feels like there's a lack of parity for unaffiliated people in that system. Like if we're having, you know, the presumption of partisanship of the people getting appointed by a vacancy committee, a partisan vacancy committee, then we're essentially excluding unaffiliated people from the vacancy committee process, unless we were to kind of make that same presumption for an unaffiliated person's vacancy. So I would think that maybe we write it in that way, that, you know, the partisan vacancy committees are to appoint a member of that party, and then the unaffiliated vacancy committee would be required would only entertain candidates who are unaffiliated. And that's something that we can put forward. I'm not saying you have to change the ordinance in order to bring it forward for that purpose. I think that should be part of the discussion in the public hearing, because it does seem like there isn't parity in that situation. And probably it would be less of an issue with partisan elections, but I don't want us to create a situation where we're saying unaffiliated people can't, you know, can't run for vacancies, essentially.
Yeah. I can jump in.
Yep.
Yeah, it may just be easier to go with the folks who sign your nominating petitions to basically be the vacancy committee for the seat. Like I said, that was still the solution for unaffiliated candidates under the partisan dynamic. But I don't see why that wouldn't work just as well, whether the races are partisan or not.
I have a question, you know, Because definitely we have a two-party system, and so, but there are a lot of people who are becoming unaffiliated. So I don't quite understand when you're saying people, there's different people from different parties who signed my petition. So what does that mean? I just think it creates an unfair situation because you already know what's going to happen. They're going to pick a Democrat or a Republican. Unaffiliated won't even have an opportunity. It's just, to me, it creates an unequitable landscape for people who have chosen to be unaffiliated, and it just, to me, creates an unequitable landscape of where we're really going to fit in. Because with your analysis, Councilmember Marcano, it's going to either be a Democrat or a Republican in the situation that you're saying, unless, like Councilmember Coombs said, it may be written that way. But then you're saying, oh, pick the people off your petition. I don't know. I think that creates inequity for sure. And I don't think it's fair for people who are unaffiliated, who are choosing. And there's a lot of percentage of people in Aurora who are becoming unaffiliated because they don't want to be associated with any party, or they're pretty moderate. And so they believe things on both sides. So, again, I'll be interested to hear what the community has to say about that, but I really think it creates an inequitable playing field. And for unaffiliates, we're just out, basically. So.
Councilmember Coombs.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So I just want to clarify, Councilmember Lawson, that there would still be a process under either solution for unaffiliated candidates. And in fact, one of the proposals in here is to just not even utilize a traditional vacancy committee as we do for partisan positions at the state level, but to just utilize our nominators. So it's not substantively different. Actually, it's exactly the same at that point, what folks are utilizing for a vacancy committee, regardless of their affiliation. And I see that Dave has his hand up, so go ahead, Dave.
That's just a general comment on the entire process and not this individual piece of it. But when we are looking at the nominators, for instance, for any of you, if the vacancy is occurring in the end of the third year or the fourth year, the nominators may no longer be in Aurora. They may no longer be in the ward. The one subject we did not do here is to try and do a poll or a study to see how stable nominators are, and if there would be a sufficient number of those nominators 3 and 4 years out. So that may be a concern as well when we're talking about nominators. I suspect when we have 50 or 100, there's still going to be a substantial number, but that is not a known factor at this point. It is a presumed factor that there would still be a strong number.
Councilmember Coombs.
Yes, go ahead, Councilmember
Yes.
Marcano.
Thank you. That's a great point, Dave. And I would love to see what that data looks like. I think that starting by taking a look at vacancy committees, which are used pretty often, as you all know, at the state level, to see how many of those precinct committee person positions are basically unfilled. Because you're right, folks, do move around for work or for other reasons. Although I participated in, I want to say 3 vacancy committees since I've lived in Colorado. And you typically have a very, very strong showing. But I am curious to know if what the turnover rate will say is of folks who sign up to be PCPs for the major parties.
All right, so let's definitely get that information. I think that's relevant information. And then my other question about the partisan elections is, would this change the process of qualifying for the ballot in any way? So in even your non-municipal elections, there's a threshold for other parties, non-major parties, to be able to qualify for the ballot. Would that type of threshold apply?
That is a great question. That is actually an unrelated issue to this currently. There's a whole slew of electoral reforms that I'm interested in pursuing. But since this is specific to charter changes, and I've already brought a couple forward, I didn't want to get into the qualifications just yet. Ideally, from my perspective, I think that is worthy of taking a look at. While at the same time, to a point that Councilmember Lawson brought up about, folks being unaffiliated, or not necessarily caring that much for either major party, which I totally understand. And I think the polling shows that that is also the case. I would love to see us adopt ranked choice voting as well. Because that would give, I think, folks of minor parties or no party more of a shot to attain office, since what we currently have is a first past the post plurality system where I think no at-large council member has been elected, I think on average, with on average more than 23% of the vote. In our last mayoral election, we had folks win with 35% of the vote. And that often happens in our wards as well. So putting that in a not polite way, more people voted for someone else than voted for the people who hold those seats. And I think that that's a problem. So it's my hope that we can, amend the charter where necessary, and then update our code, what we can control through code, to make our electoral system more equitable and accessible for folks who might not want to affiliate with any of our major parties or even a minor party, but also allow people to build minor parties, because I think this is how a good way to do that in our system.
All right, thank you for that. That is very helpful. Any other questions, comments, discussion on this
I
item?
just have a question.
Yes, Councilmember Medina.
Thank you. So you have there on the bill at the end there, it says, whereas voters have a right and a desire to be provided information about a candidate, including party or organizational affiliation, if the candidate desires to share that information. So is this something where you're saying you can or can't do, or you have to do, or you don't have to do?
No, the idea would be that this is something that you must do. I think that the whereas there, well, one, it's non-binding, and two, I just think that might have been an oversight when we were drafting this. That's my recollection anyway. Dave, was there a reason that we made that a may rather than a shall disclose that information?
I apologize for being muted. Which whereas clause is Councilmember Medina referring to? I was
It's
trying
the
to get that up
final-
and I had it blocked.
Yeah, on the first page, it's the final whereas. Whereas voters have a right and desire to be provided information about a candidate, including party or organizational, or organization affiliation, if the candidate desires to share that information. I think much like our other races in the state, that should be mandatory. And if you're not affiliated, then you get the unaffiliated label.
We can change that.
Yeah, thank you for catching that, Councilmember Medina.
Yeah, I was just kind of confused because I was like trying to go back and forth going, is it part of this or is it making, so I was wanting clarification.
Yep.
All right, any further discussion or questions? Okay, seeing none, we will move that item forward to the public hearing. And then finally, well, we will have miscellaneous items, but 3D ordinance regarding full-time council members from Councilmember Lawson.
Thank you, Councilmember Coombs. This ordinance is basically changing the charter section 3-2. As I explained, I've been kind of working on this for a couple years now, but really would like to see where actually our city sits on this issue. As you know, many of us, this council our city is growing. This city has a lot more issues that we're tackling. Being a part-time council, I don't see that we are a part-time council. I really see that the work that we're doing is full-time. And I also think because it is part-time, we may be leaving out, and I'm looking at future generations, because I won't be on council forever, or any of us, looking at maybe wanting to do this position, but because they have to hold another job, they can't. I mean, we have policy committees during the day. We have all kinds of or things that we have to, that we're part of, that we have to attend. We have to do constituent services. It's a lot. This council, since even I've been on council, the workload has become even more extensive in terms of what we're required to do. And as our city is growing, I think we're at 400,000. It's only gonna, the issues that we're gonna be tackling is only gonna get much more that we're gonna have to do. And I think it will present more opportunities for people to consider because they will have an opportunity to work full-time. To be on the council and to get paid a wage that meets the demands of the job, but also that they can make and earn a living and do the work as a public servant as well. Now, the arguments have been, well, this is, we're public servants, and I understand that. But again, I think increasing the council salaries and becoming full-time council, I just think it gives people a little bit more opportunity who wants to be on council because it is a lot of workload. And I think we need to, I would like to bring this forward for the public's consideration as well. One thing on here that I do think that I do want to kind of talk about is on page 29. In last year's meeting, we didn't really come up with a salary. There was different schedules, and I don't see that attachment here, and I'm not sure if that's something that could be attached, but we didn't come up with a salary. So I don't think I ever agreed to giving the mayor $96,000 or the mayor pro tem $82,000 or even members of the council within the 60 range, this 67,000. So that was something, because it didn't pass through that committee last year, we didn't get to some of the salary opportunities or different salaries that we could present. So with that, I guess if this moves forward, if the committee here decides to move this forward, I would like to maybe provide those charts, or what would be the best way, I guess, to do this. And is Dave on here?
I am still here. Yes, council member.
So these particular salaries that is on page 29, I don't think the committee ever really got to that point. But we did have a whole lot of different charts of different salaries that were compared to other cities kind of our size, looking at it from a manager city form of government, looking at other, I think Arapahoe County, when they got their commissioners, kind of looking at their, when they went to a full-time commission. But I just want to be able to maybe give the public some ideas of what different salaries would be. And I think that that's important for the discussion for the hearing. So I'm not sure if we should add all of those charts on here, if we can, or if the committee has to select some.
So, sorry, Dave. This is Dan. So,
hi, Dan.
Councilmember Lawson, what we can do is we can take the numbers out
Okay.
of this. Then what we can do is HR is the one that actually helped us prepare those numbers.
Okay.
So we can then attach them, and you can then have that attachment before the public hearing so people can see what that attachment was.
Yes, I would like to do that, like take these numbers out of this chart that we have on page 29. And for the commission and for the hearing, I would like to have that information because it did have a bunch of comparables. It even had what is the standard salary in Aurora. So I think that all of that's kind of important when people are looking at this particular issue beyond the other things that I stated.
So with the hearing date, what it is, the only problem with, all salary data is that's going to be dated from when you were looking at this before. We will ask HR if they can quickly update it. That may be really difficult because you have the hearings are coming up really quickly. We'll ask and we'll try and get this updated. If we can't, we'll simply note the date that was done.
Okay, that might be good for just at least that's transparent. This data, of course, could have changed, but if we can just have, I think that kind of gives a foundation of what kind of salaries, even though I know it's a little outdated, but it just gives a foundation of that. So, but if we can get some of it updated, that would be great. So, that's pretty much my discussion on this issue. I hope that the committee will move this forward to the hearing and also for discussion with those modifications or revisions.
Thank you, Councilmember Lawson. Any questions or discussion on this item?
Councilmember Coombs.
Yes, Councilmember Marcano.
Thank you. So I just want to second what Councilmember Lawson said about this issue. I think it is a matter of equity and it is very future focused. It won't benefit anyone currently on council. But I do think that, you know, this is work. It's a lot of work. So I am strongly in agreement that folks who step up to serve should also be paid enough to actually live in our city. I did want to add that if it's possible to bring the backup, because I know that for my previous two items, I also had incorporated a bunch of backup. Dave, I think you helped me organize some of that when we first brought those questions forward, because I think that all of that needs to be sent to the Citizens Ad Hoc Committee so that they have the full context of Councilmember Lawson was saying of all the conversations that we've had to accompany the minutes.
And Councilmember Coombs, I just want to make one point that I guess it's really important. This does
Yes.
not have a moonlighting provision. So if somebody still wants to have another job, then they can do so. If they feel like they can do multiple full-time jobs or whatever their jobs are, it does not have a mandate that they can still, it doesn't have a moonlighting provision. So they would still be able to run their businesses. They would still be able to have another job if they see fit. So that it doesn't have a provision where someone couldn't work another job.
Thank you for that clarification. That actually is one of the things that I've had some heartburn about with this proposal, even though I generally support it. I think it's important that there be that equity and that access for folks. But for myself, like I do have another job, which I like. And so the idea that I would have to give up that job has been kind of a difficulty for me in thinking about this. My other question is, because I do agree that we have the, significant workload, is kind of a separate but related question around the number of council members that we have serving and whether or not a larger number of council members would be appropriate given the size of our city. And that's just more of a general, I don't even know that it would be helpful to the public to have this discussion alongside that discussion. But I do think it could help with some of the workload issues if we had like maybe more wards or something along those lines to help reduce just the overall workload, which I agree is not a part-time workload. I don't think that for the most part, anybody is working part-time. And if folks are working part-time, I think it's as a result of not necessarily focusing on this role with the effort that it deserves.
Yeah, and Councilmember Coombs, yeah, and this would just provide a choice. Like I said, if this went through and it passed through the voters, it doesn't have a moonlighting provision. You have to do what's economically best for you, for you and your family, or whatever your situation is. So this is just providing a choice, but it gives someone a choice if they seek to actually want to be full-time. They have that option and they can actually earn the money to do so, where they can actually do public service, but also earn a living. Especially with all of the issues that we're addressing. And they're only going to get more issues are going to come up as our population growth and we already see that right now. So I agree with you totally on that. And it's really giving people a choice as well. So. And I do agree
Absolutely.
with you. I do think that other question that you brought out, because some constituents have told me, maybe we should look at how the wards, do we need 4 at-large people? With us expanding in the Southeast area, maybe there needs to be more ward concentration instead of more at large. So that might be something that we definitely should bring to the commission. I don't have it in this, but I think it would be something for the commission to look at for sure. And the public.
Yeah, and I don't know that we have time to look at it for this ballot, honestly, because we are cutting it close, but I think it's a worthy discussion in general. So So yeah, thank you. And I certainly support this. Is there any objection to moving this forward to the public hearing? Okay. Oh, and Councilmember Medina, did you have any comments?
No, I'm definitely in support of it. I know I've heard from a lot of constituents about that too, of going to a full-time. So I
Okay,
think we're on the right track.
excellent. Well, then hearing no objections, we will go ahead and move this forward to the public hearing. And then for miscellaneous matters, I know Michael Bryant had some questions for us regarding the public hearing.
Hi, good afternoon, council members. Michael Bryant, Public Relations Manager. We are eager to spread the word more broadly about the upcoming public hearings and just wanted to get some clarification from this committee as to exactly the format that you'd like to see those public hearings under. I know that last month there was discussion of having people sign up in advance and to denote which topic they would like to address so that we can have people kind of categorized by bucket to be able to address the committee. And it's just needed some guidance, I guess, on those buckets. If you'd like those to just be the 4 proposals discussed here today and then a general other, or if you'd like to have some other structure for people to denote which topics they'd like to address.
Yeah, so I think first I do want to make sure, because I think I saw this in some information that we received, that people must sign up in advance. I thought that the way we had stated it was that people may sign up in advance, but they may also sign up at the hearing.
We will
So I
have
want to make sure
advanced. Yes, we will have an advanced sign up on the Engage Aurora site, but that will be an optional sign up. We'll be encouraging people to sign up in advance so we can kind of have a gauge of the number of people who will be attending the public hearings, but people will be able to sign up at the event itself.
Excellent, thank you. And then the other aspect was, I thought when we talked about it last time, we wanted to separate out the public hearings, the first one on the proposals that council was bringing forward and the second one on other topics to be brought forward by members of the public. Is that how we still want to break those out, or would we want to do both at both hearings? Any thoughts, sorry, from Councilmember Lawson or Medina or Marcano?
So we were gonna kind of do these proposals where we're gonna have public comment on those, and then you're saying kind of give like a public kind of invited to be heard, kind of where people can bring up other considerations for the charter? Is that how I'm understanding it?
So that's, yeah, we could do it that way at both hearings. That way, if someone can only make it to one, they would be able to comment on everything.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, same.
Okay, then let's go ahead and do it that way, just to make it a little bit more accessible. All right, so the buckets would be agenda items, and they would list the specific agenda item or non-agenda items, and then they would just indicate, they would just state at that time whatever other topics they want to raise. Do you have any questions about that, Michael? Any more information you need from us on that?
Just to confirm then, since we had talked about a 3-minute limit for each speaker, if they sign up for multiple topics, they would be given 3 minutes for each topic they're addressing. Is that correct?
Yep.
Correct.
Same process we use for our regular meetings.
Thank you. We will then move forward and get this added to the Engage Aurora site so people can start signing up right away. And we will present some flyers and other social media language to the council members for you to be able to distribute as you wish.
I have one other question, which is, do we want to have the order be the existing topics and then the general public invited to be heard after? Because for our current meetings, it's before the agenda items. So do we want to have that mirror our current process or shift the other direction, since there are these items we want to make sure we get feedback on?
Councilmember Coombs, I think we should go the
Yeah.
reverse order. These topics here, I would think they should be discussed first and then kind of bring up those other ones because these are ones that we're trying to definitely get feedback on. So I would like to get some time on these first if that's what the committee would allow, so.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Is there any objection to structuring it that way?
Nope.
For me,
Okay, then we'll go ahead and do that. Any further questions, Michael?
No, I don't think so. Thank you so much for the clarification on that. And just for your awareness, we will be setting this up to be a hybrid meeting, so people can attend in person or sign up to speak via WebEx as well. And then we will be broadcasting on our YouTube channel like we do other policy committee meetings.
And Councilmember Coombs, the meeting on the
Yes.
18th starts at 10. Is it for us at 10 o'clock? Is that what we decided for the Saturday meeting?
I believe so. Is that what you have as well, Michael?
It is. We have 10 o'clock on the 18th and then a 7 p.m. meeting on April 11th.
Okay.
Okay, excellent. And then for our next meeting, we'll be meeting the first Tuesday of April at 2:30 p.m. Again, does that work for everybody?
So the 3rd?
So yeah, the 3rd.
Oh, I mean the 4th?
Or is it? I'm like, I'll have to look.
Yeah,
at the
I'm sorry,
calendar.
this is the 4th.
It's the 4th. Okay.
Yes, that's fine with me. And we have it at 2, so you said 2:30.
Oh, sorry. That was just my brain
Okay.
going the wrong way. So 2 p.m. on the 4th. Okay, excellent.
And Councilmember Coombs okay, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to be orderly
No,
here.
you're good. You're good.
So after that, so on that meeting, we're gonna kind of discuss what was discussed, what was talked about, or the comments from the hearing? What's gonna be
The
kind of our
18th.
agenda on there? Okay,
Yeah. So, and then I believe by then there may have been the first meeting of the Citizens Task Force also. So we'll be discussing the feedback from both of those
Okay.
sources of community feedback.
okay,
And I think we maybe are not going to take new items just to avoid, I guess we could theoretically take new items that could be heard on the 11th, but I think that would get pretty messy because that's a short turnaround. So I don't know, unless, oh, babe, sorry, Ellis just froze my screen. So unless we have any urgent items that come to us in the meantime, I think we'll expect to not hear any new business as far as proposed charter amendments from council. We could still end up with new business, I guess, from the public hearings that we may want to take into consideration.
but we'll still track that information because for future, for the future charter, that those issues may want to be we're still gonna track them though, whatever different comments.
Yeah, well, I'm saying maybe we might still add new amendments if something comes out of the public hearing that we feel like really needs to come forward. But I think our colleagues have known since last year that we're doing this, so we probably won't take any additional council generated requests unless something comes up that's very urgent. But otherwise, we'll just consider additional items based on the public hearing and the citizens ad hoc task force.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for your time today. Meeting adjourned, and we'll see you on the 18th. Well, before then for sure, but
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
so